never take it for granted. It can be taken away from us in one form or another in an instant. At that particular time in our life, we'd just lost a 21-year-old son, Benjamin. It certainly didn't fix the problem, but it certainly empowered us to continue and to sort of move forward from that. We're part of a tribe, we are part of a community, and it's expected that at times of need that you can turn to that community, and that community will catch you and they will support you. And it's not a sense of weakness if we ask for help or support. In fact, it's a strength that we have. You don't have to hit a speed bump in order to take this action. You can do it preemptively, be ahead of the game.
G'day, welcome to the Realms of Power. Today I've got my amazing friend Peter Clements. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tony. This has been a long time in the making.
It certainly has, my friend. And look, we met almost 20 years ago at a personal growth workshop. And we've been involved in that sort of work for many years together, doing leadership roles, supporting people just to really turn their power on in whatever way that is. So, mate, it's been an honor knowing you and looking at the man you are and how many people you've just inspired from a voluntary perspective. You're not trying to get any gain other than just being there to support. So, mate, I really honor you in that. Yeah, mate, can you give us some background about how you sort of even found yourself in that personal growth field? And then we'll just see where this podcast takes us.
Yeah, okay. Well, look, this was nearly 20 years ago, Tony, and I guess everyone that gets involved in that sort of work initially as a participant, and they have challenges that they've got. And at that particular time in our life, we'd just lost a 21-year-old son, Benjamin, and we had certainly been through quite a grief process. And then eventually we were lucky enough to have some friends who were involved in personal growth that recommended that we came along. And so that is really how we got involved in that work ourselves. And the process that we went through as participants really enabled us to find some perspective in terms of what had happened and the loss that we'd suffered. And it certainly didn't fix the problem, but it certainly empowered us to continue and to sort of move forward from that. And I think those particular workshops were so, you know, experiential and so changing for us that, like a lot of people, we sort of developed a taste for that and went on to become part of the support crew and the leadership team over the years. So, and that is really where we go back, Tony, all those years ago.
Mm. And look, there's a lot of parents out there that might have lost a child, whether it was a baby or, in your case, someone who was just had his life ahead of him. And unless you'd been in that position, you really couldn't understand, I think, the scale of the grief and the loss. And so to be involved in a process that maybe, again, didn't fix anything, but it helped you, empowered you, as your words are saying. How important is it to get support when you've been, and the right support when you've been through something like that, Peter?
Oh, look, grief and loss are something that we all have to cope with, but I think we're programmed to expect that it's going to happen with grandparents first and then parents ultimately, and then ultimately siblings. And I think we're programmed to expect that, any children that we have will sort of see our lifespan out. And so the interesting thing about that kind of loss is that the body is not programmed to sort of deal with that loss. And so there's no software that sort of is configured. There's no, you know, logarithms or anything that sort of cope with that. So it's uncharted territory. And, I think you've got to go through a period of loss and mourning. That is a natural, and it's really important that you do that. But there comes a point where you do have to understand what has happened and sort of find a means to to, look back on the time that you've had, in our case with our son, which was 21 magical years, and he changed our life. And, as a result of that, the support that we got to see us through that was quite extraordinary. And it wasn't just me; it was my wife, it was my daughter, and it was a lot of people involved in our family and a circle of friendship as well. So it was really sustaining what we got out of that.
Cheers. Thank you so much for sharing, Pete. And as we've known each other, I met you on that very first workshop, and I've sort of at a distance, but also as a very close friend over many years, just seen how you have coped with that life challenge. And people have, as you know, many different life challenges. That's one big one. Some people it's a health challenge. Some people it's a family dynamics challenge. Some people it's a challenge. But having that power to be able to, I guess, cope and learn from that, and then to be able to go on and inspire others has certainly been part of your and my journey. What would you say it's been like to be able to support other people through whatever their challenges have been? What has that given you as someone who's helped so much?
Look, I think it has empowered us with empathy and understanding. And, you know, all of the challenges that people have, as you said, whether they're illness or health, whether they're relationships, whether they're financial, whatever is thrown at people, at the end of the day, they need to be able to sit down and talk about that and understand what's behind it and find some way to move through that and to get beyond it. And the beautiful thing about that work is that when people have been participants in that work and had a need for the support, they there is a need to pass that on and to be a part of that process as well, because it's been so life changing for yourself and your family. And so you start on a journey where you just want to help people. You just want to see them break through whatever it is that's holding them back. And so over the years, my involvement in that work has really been a very important part of my life. And the team, the tribe, the community that we've been a part of, and the mission and the vision that we've had in terms of supporting people through their darkest hours has really given us a purpose, I think, moving forward.
I know you've reflected on this part of that whole process before, Pete, is about being alone. And there's a lot of people that try and manage things by themselves, and everyone's going to have their own path. But you would say that brotherhood or that community or that support, reaching out for support, is an important part of standing in your power. Yes, it's our sovereign responsibility to be empowered, but that interdependence of community is also, I believe, really important. What would you speak into that for turning your power on?
Look, I think, over the years, I think that people have it's innate within us that we try to address these problems ourselves. It's whether it's pride or ego or whatever, we tend to bottle them up, and we tend to think that we've just got to, find a way to get through it. And I think to some extent we kind of conditioned to stand on our own feet as well. But we're never intended. We're part of a tribe, we are part of a community. And it's expected that at times of need that you can turn to that community, and that community will catch you and they will support you. And so I think that the commu- you know the lifestyle that we live, the society that we live in today is really becoming more isolationist. I think people are tending to sort of become introvert and probably try to address these problems themselves. But really, it's counterintuitive. They really should turn to friendship. They should turn to tribe and community, and they should seek support from them.
I think an important point, though, is a lot of people end up in toxic relationships or have people in their tribe, in their family, sometimes in their circle that aren't actually serving them, which may be one of the reasons why they do sort of feel safer just being alone. So it's actually just as important to find the right tribe, the right people that you resonate with. How important do you think that is? And that could be in work culture as well, Pete.
Oh, look, it is definitely. I mean, I think we're very lucky over the years that we have been inducted into a part of a tribe where well-being and concern and compassion is really paramount. But you're so right. I mean, there's people that do end up in toxic relationships and they can't turn to family. So, and this is where the work that we've done and the realms of power workshop that you've been instrumental in putting in place over the last 12 months or so is really so important, that people can actually turn to a community where they are going to be heard and they're going to be understood, and then there's no judgment that's going to be made on them.
Yeah, I think judgment is a big one too, isn't it? And the ego that sometimes shows up for people where they've got their own agenda and being able to find that egoless environment. And that's so important in leadership as well. How important do you think that ego is in some of those environments?
Look, unfortunately, I mean, ego is a good thing when it's harnessed in the right way. It drives us and it inspires us as well. But ego can definitely be on the other side of the ledger. And I think that ego is something that drives people, and we've just got to be very careful that we can actually put that apart, put that away. And the communities that we have been a part of through personal development, we've been very lucky that ego is not something that has been prevalent in that community. And it's been an egoless community when we did come together and do this work. And I think that is really important when you're asking people to bear themselves, to bear their souls, to speak their truth, that no one is going to stand in judgment of them, rightly or wrongly, for taking that path.
What I've observed in you as being certainly one of the really long-term leaders in that is in that leadership environment. And that's whether that's in a voluntary organization or it could be in a workspace, is actually bringing those great qualities of leadership. And I think if we're talking about realms of power and turning on power, leadership has got to be one of those topics. What would you share with our listeners about some of the things you've learned about yourself in how to be a great leader?
Look, I think until we hit the speed bump in our life, up until that point, I was involved in business and management, and I think the form of management that I sort of practiced was probably very measured and very KPI gauged and very sort of structured in terms of hierarchy. But the work that we've done since then, I think has really brought about a completely different leadership style. I People need to see you as a leader. They need to see that you're willing to get into the fight with them, and that you're willing to lead by example, and that you're driven by a need to try and get the best out of people, to empower people to reach their full potential. And I think once you've mastered that form of leadership, where people don't feel threatened by you but feel they want to follow you, that is when people actually get on board and they really find their true potential.
I love those words, potential, and then them finding you helping them as the leader, finding their best version of themselves. Like, how could you bottle that up? Like, because managers might be assigned a role and leaders in an organization might be assigned a role, but it's bottling up that they have potential, the team around you have potential. And as a leader, to try and turn that power on for that individual in that organization is so huge. It's so important. and you said empowering them, but what's an example you can think of where you might have been able to help someone realize that full potential in your leadership roles?
Well, I guess the thing about being involved in personal development is that majority people you're working alongside are volunteers. And so you don't have any direct power over them as such. They are there because they choose to be there. And you have to inspire them. You can't be dominant. You can't be unreasonable. And when you're in the workplace, that is a slightly different environment that you're living in. You've got people that are paid to be there in the workplace, and the drivers behind those people in the workplace are very different to being in a sort of egoless personal development space. And so my experience with in the working environment has been very different with people. There's been very different dynamics in the workplace as a normal, and trying to get those people centered and get them back onto an even keel so that they can be empathetic, is has been a real challenge. And but the work that I've done in the personal development space has really supported me in the commercial environment, where I have been able to take colleagues and people involved in the organization that I've led, and really get the best out of them by practicing the same sort of leadership that I've done in personal development.
Yeah, I love that. And it was an honor to have you on the team for our recent Realms of Power retreat, which was the first one we officially ran. Can you share with the listeners what that was like for you, your experience? You were our team leader. What was that experience like, just off the top of your head?
Look, probably a different experience to one that I've had in the past with personal development, but an empowering experience. Once again, to see participants come in and to see them have breakthroughs. Um, and the whole concept of the workshop that we're involved in, the realm of power, and the 12 different spokes of that is just so relevant. People lose their power, people give it away. There's a range of reasons that they pass on their power effectively. And the biggest problem is that in the majority of cases, they really don't know that they've done that. It's something that has sort of happened subliminally. And so the magic of the Realm of Power workshop is that, there is going to be some relevance out of the 12 spokes of that wheel that fall within your life. And myself, I feel that there are areas of the realm of power that I'm foregoing, that I'm not strong in. Especially, I've reached a point in my life where I've recently retired from full-time work, and that has not been an easy thing for me to do. And it's because I feel like I'm giving away my power. And so in my own case, I've got to find a way to take that power back, and to find a purpose in my life that may not be what it has been up to now. And so that it's just so incredibly relevant, this work, and people that don't necessarily see that they've got a challenge as such, but this is just a fine tune. This really brings them back onto track.
Yeah, look, the Realms of Power is created after many years of as a chiropractor, just seeing why do the same problems keep coming back in people's spine. And so we had to
Yeah.
look deeper than just a physical cause. So sometimes it was a nutritional cause, sometimes it was an emotional block, sometimes it might have been a financial thing or an environmental thing or any of the different realms. And most people would realize that they haven't got it right in all areas. I certainly don't either, Pete, of course. And so I use the own framework or scaffold to help turn people's power on, because I think the opposite of that is when your power's down, when you're either externalizing or validating, using an excuse. We use the 6 words. judge, justify, whinge, whine, blame, or bitch. And if any of those are happening, you're going to be down on power somewhere because you're blaming something else. It's justifying why you're doing this or that. You're not fully standing in your sovereignty and fully standing in your power in, as you say, whatever realm that is, whether that's life
Yeah.
purpose, leadership, finances, relationships is such a massive one. A lot of people tolerate certain things or they blame the other partner or blame the kids or the parents for whatever else, and they're not standing in their power. So yeah, we've tried to, in that realms of power retreat, create a safe space, egoless environment, and just point out that they can use that scaffold to turn their own power on, because it's not about us fixing them at the retreat either. It's about going, how can we give them the tools that they can use to turn their own power on, and how to heal yourself, which I think is one of the biggest things missing in our current society today. How would you say, with like AI, social media, all the people externalizing and giving away their power in comparisons to other people, that people could just really say, yeah, it is time for me to take responsibility for my own power.
Well, I think we're living in a world where technology is starting to take a lot of that power away from us. And I think as we see the advancements into AI, and there will be further advancements into a field that we've not even given an acronym for yet, it will continue to develop. And all of these will start to nibble away at the framework that we need to support ourselves. So I think awareness is the key here. We've got to understand the areas that we're perhaps giving away or foregoing or trading our power, and basically just be ahead of the game.
So the framework we used for that, of course, Pete, was the torch. So we grabbed a torch and we chose to pick up the torch, chose to turn it on and shine a light or create awareness about an area that we want to create. And using little tools like that in the retreat, again, just creates an analogy of people's awareness and focus on an area. It's very easy to sweep stuff under the carpet, and some people do that with grief. Some people do that with not feeling safe. Why do you think people do put stuff off and procrastinate?
Well, it's easier to sweep something under the rug rather than, face the truth or argue the point. And I think coming back to leadership again, I mean, I think leadership is the ability to influence outcomes, to take challenges straight on, and not to try and sweep them under the carpet or the mat. And so part of this work is really one of recognition, is one of awareness, of self-awareness. And I think it is so important that as a society that we increase that awareness that we all have around the areas that we are challenged in.
So, what wisdom would you want to share, Pete, with someone who's, just in the middle of their busy life, 30 to 40, 50, and they've got kids, they've got their life, they're going along, but they know they're feeling stuck or they're struggling somewhere. What advice, as the man you are, as the leader you are, would you give someone like that, whether it's create awareness, take some action, just some leadership advice or wisdom you would want to pass on or share?
Look, I think we all kind of feel comfortable in the world that we live. And I know, going back 20 years, we were in a comfortable sort of situation, and then obviously all of a sudden change hit us. So I think we've got to be aware of the family, and the support that we have, the love that we have, and we've got to never take it for granted. It can be taken away from us in one form or another in an instant, and you'll never get it back. So we've got to make the most of what we've got. We've got to live in the moment. We've got to love those around us. We've got to have great appreciation for what we have got. And, you know, we've got to develop the fortitude going forward that things will change. that there will be change in our life, and that we've got to be able to, identify that, recognize it, and find a way through that period.
But there's such beautiful wisdom in that. I know through the lived experience, I certainly felt the emotion come up in your voice then when you talk about it can be taken away in a heartbeat and people take things for granted. And there's such truth in those words. Often people have to wait until there's a death or a funeral or something to take action. But if they could hear your message, hear the depth of, loss that you might have been through and not take their life for granted, for actually taking that action and creating that life purpose or vision or thing that you want to create by standing into your power. The time is now.
Mm.
And the opposite of that, like you said, is the comfy mattress, procrastinating, putting it off. But by taking for granted what you have right now and what vision you're willing to create, that is the realms of power right there, is
It is.
actually just really feeling into that. So, wow, Pete, what a beautiful message to share. Is there anything you'd like to add on to that?
Oh, look, I don't think so. I think that is really, my core. And I think we can all be better people. I think we can all appreciate more what we have and those around us. And it's not a sense of weakness if we ask for help or support. In fact, it's a strength that we have, and we should be able to do that. And the ego, the pride that we have is probably what holds us back from doing that. So I'm just looking to the side here at the realms of power wheel, and it is just so relevant in terms of the life that we all have. And there is going to be one of those spokes that is relevant for the audience that is listening to this. And I would certainly encourage them to step into this process and live in the moment.
Mm. Thank you, Peter. It's such a beautiful share. I guess one of the analogies I've used for many years has been the importance of getting the right coach or right support. So I use the example of a swimmer. So if you wanted to be a better swimmer, right, there's a couple of different paths. You could just practice more, or you could go and get a coach. And if you've got an Olympic coach, you might not be at that standard. It might not be the right coach. But if you've got the right coach for you, that's probably the fastest way to become a better swimmer. And then you've got to practice. Because if you're practicing your old crappy technique, it's not going to get there. So by asking for the right support in that right community is probably one of the fastest ways you can turn your power on in whatever realm that is. And I think that's critical. And a lot of people, yeah, whether they use an excuse of money or time or things like that. Well, the return on investment by getting that realm, getting that life will create the vibrations in your life where you will be resonating at that higher level. So I think there's a beautiful message in what you just shared, Pete. That's so amazing.
Yeah, and the other thing is that you don't have to hit a speed bump in order to take this action. You can do it preemptively, and
Yeah.
I think that is really what your workshop encourages people to do, is to be ahead of the game.
Well, Pete, mate, thank you so much for sharing. It's been such an honor and a pleasure to know you, have you as one of the friends in my life, and share our stories of our journeys together, and to be able to work together moving forward and inspire other people to turn their power on, mate. Yeah, I feel very blessed, humbled, and grateful that you're in my life. So, thanks so much for coming on today, mate. I really appreciate it.
Oh, look, Tony, I just want to thank you for your friendship over the last 20 years. And I also want to acknowledge you for the energy that you have brought into the realms of power, your workshop. This is your vision, and you have empowered a team of people to be on the journey with you. And the energy that you have put into this is an inspiration to a lot of us. So thank you for that, and long may it continue.
Oh, thank you, Peter. And for our listeners tuning into the Realms of Power once again, we'd really be honored and grateful if you could share these episodes. There's a lot of people out there that might just hear something that helps them turn their power on, and that sharing of these episodes might be a pathway that helps them in their life somehow. So thanks again for all the listeners that have tuned in. Have an awesome day. See ya.